Welcome into Betting Weekly Fast Break, where we're going to break down the NBA playoffs with one game tonight, but we're going to look at all the series and what's been a fantastic and fascinating second round of the NBA postseason. I am Doug Kezirian alongside Wes Reynolds. And Wes, I thought for sure we would see chalk prevail last night, maybe not cover the spread, but at least win the game. But the Knicks delivered something I still haven't quite found the right words for it, and I am baffled.
Yeah, look, I am as well because this is not a Knicks team that's really a good defensive team as a whole, even though Bridges has been tremendous. Bridges has really been the standout for the Knicks the entire series on defense. But the Celtics, the offense has just been inefficient. Either, in game one, I think it was too many threes, right? I don't even remember the amount. It seemed like they took about 70 threes. And then they went really ISO in the fourth quarter last night, and Tatum couldn't get going at all. Brown couldn't get going. A little too much ISO, and it made the Celtics, I think, a little bit easier to defend. And somehow, some way, the Knicks are going back to the Garden up 2-0.
Truly remarkable. You mentioned Bridges had not scored all game and then has all 14 of his points in the fourth quarter for the second straight game. The Knicks come back from a 20-point deficit in the second half. Some figures from Bet Rivers. There was a $225 bet on the Knicks live money line at plus 6,000, which is 60 to 1, and that paid $13,500. So it was a funny sort of thing on Twitter. Oh, we got to bet the live underdog, right? This is what's been going on. And at
Mm-hmm.
that time, there had been no favorites in the no favorites yet in the second round to win. So at that point, it was the first five road teams have won in the second round. So sure enough, it happened. They came all the way back. I thought another awesome prop that cashed, and Bet Rivers did take a bet. Josh Hart 100 to 1 to be the top scorer in game two. So the most points in game two. We know about Tatum just laying an egg on the last play, but really 2 points, I believe, at halftime. And then even Brunson didn't score a lot. It was Josh Hart with 23 points. He delivers. That $25 bet paid $2,500. So good on those bettors to seize the moment. And more impressive, the pre-flop, the 100 to 1 on Josh Hart leading the game in scoring. Usually he's points and rebounds. Usually he's around double-digit rebounds. But that's what's the beauty of this Knicks squad is that it's kind of any given night amongst four guys or so.
And it makes probably the Knicks of any of the 8 remaining teams, I think, in the playoffs, the hardest in terms of player props. You would think that they'd be the most predictable because Tom Thibodeau relies on the starters, doesn't really go to his bench as much. Only a couple guys playing regular minutes, McBride, and then, of course, Mitchell Robinson. But it's because of the foul trouble that they're so unreliable because Josh Hart, is a guy that got into foul trouble a lot in the first round series against Detroit. And then Carl Towns has never met a foul he didn't like. So it's always kind of dangerous. And when you're playing those guys like points, rebounds, or points, rebounds, assists, you have to anticipate, okay, are they going to be in foul trouble or are they not? And Carl Towns really in both games, especially in game one, has been the victim of foul trouble. So that's what makes the Knicks so difficult, I think, in terms of like a player prop standpoint. But somehow, some way, they don't ask how you do it. They ask how many, and how many is they're up to nothing.
When I find the right words to fully capture everything going on, I'll let you know. But for now, let's turn the page to the one playoff game we have tonight. A stunner in the opener. T Wolves were about 7-point favorites in game one. Steph Curry goes down in the mid second quarter, out for the game. And now we've later learned about a week, or maybe at least a week, I should say, with a hamstring strain. And now the T Wolves at home trying to do what the Thunder did last night. 10.5 point home favorites, over under 201. So I guess we really have kind of two outcomes here, and I guess that's the case. But will the T Wolves just flip the switch, right the ship, and Golden State will say, "Hey, we got what we came for, which was a one win, and we'll live to fight another day now that we have home court advantage and can return home"? Or will the T Wolves play tight and ineffective like Boston did for the most part, and will the Warriors, even shorthanded without Steph Curry, steal game two like they did game one? I'm not ready to go there. I think when we've seen some series price movement as well, with Minnesota at minus 225, that was around $1.50 on the adjusted price, but maybe went up in addition to action, but also learning with the extent of Curry's injury. I'm on the T Wolves every which way tonight. First quarter, first half, and game. That helped me. Did the same with the Celtics last night, covered first quarter and half, but didn't cover the game, obviously. So it actually helped to diversify that portfolio a little bit. So I'm going to go a half unit on each of the first quarter, first half, and the game line. I do think Kerr has some tricks up his sleeve. I think he's going to play that second unit like he did against Houston in game five, and they might muck it up a little bit. But I think the T Wolves will be aggressive here tonight and go wire to wire, much like we saw OKC last night.
I think your breakdown is right, Doug, but I don't know. For me, I'm priced out a little bit, laying 10.5 with such a low total at 201. The Warriors have, they have been able to win. Excuse me, as my mic falls over, but they have been able to win without Steph. I think all time 8-3 in the playoffs without him. Certainly, there's that case for the fallen hero. I think in this spot, but maybe the fallen hero kind of happened, I think, in game one in the second half, as you had Draymond have a better than normal offensive game. You had Buddy Hield have a better than normal offensive game. Like, I thought this was a series where Buddy Hield was really going to struggle because he's not a very good defender. And because you need to throw multiple guys at Ant-Man, which means you got to have GP2, you got to have Moody, you throw Jimmy, you throw Draymond at him. And Buddy Hield is the guy they want to exploit defensively. But now he has to have heavier minutes, because I thought his minutes were going to decline because of the defensive deficiencies. But now you're going to have him here. So, yeah, I think that you're right. I think that this is where the T Wolves get back, and I'll talk a little bit more about why when we get to the breakdown of some of the props that I bet tonight. But it's a pretty steep price with a very low total.
Yeah, you're paying a tax. And to your point, you're right. The Warriors are much better when you kind of overlook them and don't expect much. They don't play well at times during the regular season when they're fat and happy. The reason I like fading them without Steph is more that it's about the T Wolves. Like, really, the time to fade the T Wolves was when Steph went down in game one. It was clearly a flat spot for Minnesota, having done the victory tour around Crypto Arena in LA after a 5 game win over the Lakers and trying to prove all those doubters wrong. The T Wolves are better with their backs against the wall or chip on their shoulder in the underdog role, not when a lot is expected them. And they showed their youth in game one, and it was the Warriors who came in with that chip. Now I think the T Wolves have been woken up, and I don't think they care that Steph is out. I don't think they're going to come out expecting to win or anything like that, because they just got punked and hit in the mouth with a team playing without Steph Curry. So I think because it was an early injury and that they were unable to flip the switch. And I love what Chris Finch said after the game, calling out his team and specifically calling out his star, Anthony Edwards. That's why I believe in them. And there's just a human element to this for the Warriors. Now, I know it's fallen hero to your point, but I think they rallied in game one. I do think there's going to be an element of a little bit of not apathy, but passivity in terms of the loose balls, the rebounds. I think that the T Wolves are going to play like the hungrier team, and they frankly are the much better team. And I think the shock value of the Golden State offense, which I talked about earlier in the week, and that's why I liked Golden State first quarter. I thought it's really hard to prepare. I think they got a game under their belt, so to speak, and it won't be as difficult because they're not having to chase around Curry. So that's sort of the reason. But I am going to be looking into some props as well, and I'm curious what you have for your props, because I have a few as well.
Well, you led me into one, and that was with Ant-Man. And we know superstars are always taxed in the NBA prop market, and especially in the playoffs. But I think what you said about Chris Finch calling out Ant-Man, I don't think he's going to be like, super sensitive here. I think he's going to be like, okay, all right, I'm going to show these whats, and because Ant-Man is an ornery SOB, and I think he plays better when he's angry. And I think you're going to see him play more angry tonight. And he has not shot the ball well. If you look at the game 5 against the Lakers in the closeout game, and then combine it with game 1, I think he's been 14 of 41, so almost 33% basically shooting from the floor. He still closed out with 23 points, but I think he realized he can drive against this Warriors defense and attack the rack. And I think it was not only Chris Finch calling out Ant-Man, but also calling out the referees here, because the were a little bit physical and they were grabbing and clutching Rudy and clutching everybody. So whenever that happens, whenever you have a coach, I think in the playoffs, more often than not, when the coach calls out the officiating, you see that team get an extra couple calls, I think, in the next game. And I think you're going to see that probably with Minnesota. So I played over points rebounds at 34.5 with Ant-Man. I don't think he's going to fall in love necessarily with the jump shot, which we know sometimes he can do. He's going to take plenty of them, but I think you're going to see him drive to the rim and try to get these guys in foul trouble. And the Warriors are going to put a bunch of different defenders on him. They're going to put Draymond or Jimmy Butler, Moses Moody, Gary Payton II. They don't want Buddy on him because he's going to cook Buddy. I think defensively. So I grabbed over 34.5 points and rebounds with the Ant-Man. And I also like the over with Rudy Gobert, 10.5 rebounds. I think it's minus 127 still at Bet Rivers. Rudy did get clutched and grabbed a lot in game one. So you're going to see them, I think, really look for that and call some more fouls and get those guys out of the game. We know the Warriors are outsized, and we saw that materialize in game one, which is why Udoka went to that double big zone where he played Sengun and he played Steven Adams together. So the Warriors, I just think, really struggle with rebounding because they're good rebounders off the bench, like a Kevon Looney. He's not going to give you anything offensively from a scoring standpoint. So the Warriors are just, they're going to give up rebounds and have to be willing to do that. And it paid off in game 7 against Houston, but don't think it will tonight.
All right. So, and that the market agrees with you. So, Gobert's now 11.5 rebounds, but the over's plus 104. You can do an alt line minus money at 10.5. And I see it similarly. And I think it's going to help that. Remember, the Lakers went small against Minnesota, and Ant drove a bunch to the rack. And the Warriors, I mean, what? Draymond starting at 6'6" center.
Mm-hmm.
And Ant's athleticism around the rim, he can just have his way. So I am seeing it similarly. I do worry a little bit about a blowout in maybe the fourth quarter, although I think the Warriors bench unit might actually
Yeah.
force Finch to keep his starters in because he can't mess around like Udoka did in that game when they were blowout. I think it was game 5. I'm going to do a half unit on Ant over 6.5 first quarter points. Um, I just think he's going to attack. It's going to be more pronounced in the first quarter, and it's going to be a layup line or dunk line for Ant. Now it's juicy at certain places minus 152, but I still think there's a giant edge there. And I'm going to get involved in some of the props. Maybe I'm motivated by Josh Hart going 100-1 to be the leading scorer in the Knicks game last night. But I think because of the potential of a blowout and the bench unit and things like that, I think we could see an outlier. So I'm going to go with a tenth of a unit, 0.1x on Nas Reed being the most points in the game, the leading scorer at 30-1 plus 3,000. I think it's one of those where Nas can go off and Butler and those guys get pulled. They're going to try early, but I can see, Kerr playing most of the second half with some of his bench guys and them just sort of punting like they did game 5 in Houston. So I think this is a wild card game in terms of the prop market. And I like to lean into things when it's something like that. When there's going to be a wide range of outcomes, I do like to pick Nas Reed, something like that. Again, tenth of a unit, I'll be okay. I also want to do some single game parlays. I know those are fun, but I do think it's a way to take care of some business with some alt lines that are favorable. So I'm going to do DiVincenzo just to make at least 2 threes. Nas Reed just to make 2 threes. I think the Warriors defense won't have the edge like it did, and I think there's going to be open shots for those guys off the bench, and they're going to bomb their threes. And it's plus 106. So I think that's a solid play. Again, well, they're more like, they're 50-50 props, so to speak, is at least 2.5 threes. But I think just to make 2 plus and then to parlay him is plus 106. I think there's value there. Again, I think the Warriors' recovery defense, once they have to collapse the middle, will be advantageous. And I'm going to do a half unit on adding those two same plays with a same game parlay and Butler under 25.5 points. I don't think Butler goes off. This isn't a game 7 without Curry where someone's going to have to shoulder the scoring burden. I think they're going to be fine. Pack it in, and live to fight another day. If the game follows the script that I think it will be, so that same game parlay with those 3 props is plus 255. So I'm a half unit on that one too. I don't typically do this, but I think with, increased minutes with certain guys in a game like this, the same game parlay, like on my tool belt of betting, I think is something I'm leaning into a lot, or these props and these index bets. like the Nas Reed one at 30-1. I think there's value here, and there's ways to sort of lean into the chaos.
Before I give my opinion on kind of like what's going to happen, in terms of the rotation with Steph obviously being out, I wanted to get kind of your opinion. Who do you think benefits the most from an offensive standpoint for Golden State with Steph not being in the lineup tonight?
So it's a couple things. So because we're relatively early in the series, I think Buddy sort of the T Wolves weren't just prepared. Like the offensive rebound and then the dribble replace of Healed in the corner would scoot in, and then the guy who had the long rebound, whether it be Moody, would move left and then dish it. I think Draymond had a lot of passing because these T Wolves weren't prepared. I think they're going to be more buttoned up. It could be Butler because if he drives and gets to the free throw line and sort of and takes advantage of an aggressive defense that may go for more pump fakes and things like that, I just think Butler. I've been eating my words, but I just think he's a little overrated with the playoff Jimmy stuff. I don't think he can shoot that great. Um, and I just think he's great. His edge, his competitive fire is his biggest edge. And so when the other team is hungry and ready to match because they're down 0-1, I don't think his offense is going to be there. Now he's going to get his steals. He's good at assists. He'll have like 5 or 6 assists, and he's a leader by effort, which is great. But I just don't think it's as pronounced in this particular playoff game because Minnesota is going to should be the hungrier team.
See,
So I'll
what
say
you
healed. I'll say healed.
Okay, because what you said about Jimmy, I think is true. And you also had not only Buddy, but also Draymond have, I think, much better than anticipated offensive games. So do I kind of sell off a little bit? Maybe not necessarily selling them, but buying somebody else. And the guy I would buy here is Pods. I think Pods, 10 games he played this year without Steph Curry. Steph Curry missed 12 games. Pods played in 10 of the 12 he missed. And he averaged about 14 a game in those 10 games. So it's not that much higher than what the points are being put out overnight. I think it was 12 and a half, and I think it still is. But I think Pods over 22 and a half points, rebounds, and assists might be the way I would look here because number one, he's going to have to play more minutes. I think because he only ended up, I think, with 27 minutes in game number one. He's probably going to be in the mid to high 30s, you would think, if this game is even remotely competitive. So I like Pods a little bit at over 22 and a half. I think he's willing to be aggressive enough. If his shot's not going, he can be the main assist guy if he needs to be. So, you know, at this point, I think it's all been accounted for. The markets have been adjusted for the most part with Steph being out, but it would seem to me that like Pods, because the one thing I worry about Buddy, and I wasn't willing to bet Buddy under 15 and a half on the points. I would certainly lean that way, but it is Buddy's defense. And Buddy's defense concerns me because he's going to be matched up with Ant-Man and, you know, and it how many times they're going to have to switch repeatedly and have Jimmy guard him or have Draymond guard him. So that's why I did like the Ant-Man over because I think he's just going to be able to live at the line tonight. But with Pods, who else are they going to put on? I guess they could put like Alexander Walker off the bench or somebody on him, but I would think Pods at least has a relatively solid game tonight, even though he
I
only had
like your
3 in game 1.
I like your idea with Pajemski because even when Steph's out there, he's not afraid to shoot. So sometimes you shoot only with when you're a young guy like he is when the shot clock's expiring or within you get a grenade and you have to shoot it. But he trusts his stuff and Kerr has instilled that in him. So I like that aggressive tone, and they're certainly going to be focused on Healed after what happened in game one. And I think they'll still let Draymond shoot, but Draymond only shot 5 attempts early because he was 4 or 5. So um, and then Butler's going to be pump faking like no other in the mid range and get guys in the popcorn machine. And I just don't know if that's going to be rewarded. Maybe Finch has instructed them accordingly. So I can see Pods going off, and he fills up the stat sheet. To your point, the PRA. So I can certainly get behind that and see where you're coming from. We also want to encourage you to get involved in the chat here on Betting Weekly Fast Break. We have I'm Unfriendly. Great username. Hell yeah, Doug and Wes, best in the business. So we appreciate the shout out there.
Well, that was very
What?
friendly from I'm Unfriendly. So thank
Yeah,
you very much, sir.
yeah. I guess don't
Don't judge
don't
a
judge a
book
book by
by
its
its title.
cover.
Yes. Or by its
uh,
Twitter handle.
Question for you before we get to the other three series that are off. Any opinion on the series price? This opened around 150, 160 in the market. It's minus 225 here at Bet Rivers. Knowing that what Steph's going to be out for at least a week, I'm I think the Warriors, let me rephrase. The Warriors will be ready even if they go home 1-1. And we saw them in game 3 without Butler against Houston still win. And I just think Houston was very different, very inexperienced compared to this T-Wolves team. I think minus 225 feels like the right price. I certainly agree with the market move. I'm not quite ready to pull the trigger. The only way, in my eyes, minus 225 is value is if Minnesota wins the next 2 games. Obviously, they
Mhm.
have to win tonight, and then that number will go up a little bit, but it'll come way down the other way if the Warriors win game 3. So it's only value if the T Wolves win the next 2 games, and I'm not quite ready to go there. I think Golden State comes back to Minnesota 2-2.
I would agree with that. And if it's anything $2 or less, if you're shopping around, I think might be worth the stab here. I didn't want to get too like crazy with the cheese whiz here and like try to predict exact spread with this monumental of an injury. That's obviously the main storyline in the season. So there you see the graphic there from Bet Rivers, Minnesota in 6 plus 350, Minnesota in 7, $3. So I didn't want to feel. I felt like I was guessing if I did that. So if you're gonna play it, I think you'd rather play straight series price instead of really going with like the exact score or into those markets, I think.
Minnesota 7-7 is enticing, but you're right. We don't know what Steph's situation is. It's only out at least a week, and we know hamstrings. Guys can come play and then go out after the first quarter. And we've certainly seen that many times in sports. The hamstrings are a tricky thing. It's not a bone that's healing, and it's not like it's something on his off non-shooting hand. So I'd be careful there. So I'd only get involved with the T Wolves, but this is not going to be a walk in the park. Starting with tonight, I do think that that second unit for Kerr is really going to wreak some havoc. But I still believe in the urgency of Minnesota to take care of their business. We have 3 other series to talk about, and I'll do you a favor. The Indiana native, the IU grad. We can talk about your Indiana Pacers, who take both games in Cleveland, now favorites in the series price at minus 200. They're not favorites in the Eastern Conference, which is just the beauty of the betting because the combined probability and what they would be in the next round. But they're actually the long shot in the Eastern Conference at plus 350, the fourth favorite. So, what do you make of this series price, given Cavs have already also dealing with some injuries themselves?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. From the macro sense, when you were talking about the Eastern Conference, just in general, the Pacers don't really get a lot of the benefit of the doubt because remember last year when they played Milwaukee, Dame was hurt, Giannis missed a game, so they never got that benefit of the doubt. And then the Knicks started to kind of drop like flies as the series went along, and that's probably part and parcel of the fact that Tom Thibodeau rides these guys like their secretariat, and he did the same thing in Chicago where you ride these starters and you don't have a bench, and all of a sudden they start to break down as you get later in the playoffs. But I think it's priced right here because I think the market doesn't want to commit. I think the books don't want to commit one way or the other because, okay, when is Mobley coming back? Like, I think if Garland, if this were regular season, he'd be out maybe for the rest of the series dealing with this toe injury. And I think the sideline reporter, I think it was Jared Greenberg on the TNT coverage, I want to give him credit, reported that the other night. So, Garland, that's going to be touch and go at that toe injury. But Mobley's really the key for Cleveland because Mobley is the mismatch guy. I think even more so than Donovan Mitchell. As ridiculous as that sounds with him scoring 48 in game number 2, Donovan always kind of cooks the Pacers. But I think Mobley is really the difference maker from the matchup standpoint because when Miles Turner, who's a good rim protector, goes out of the game, who do you have to defend him? You have Pascal Siakam and you have Obi Toppin, who are both too small, and you have Thomas Bryant, who's too slow. So Evan Mobley is the guy that can cook, but they really need him back. But I think the Pacers, much is made, Doug. I think the fact that, oh, who didn't the Cavs have in game number 2? They had a 7-point lead with 30 some seconds to go and didn't make it happen. So it wasn't about that at that point what the Cavs didn't have. It's about what the Pacers did have. And the Pacers had a lot of guts and a lot of heart. And yeah, you get some luck in there, but I think the Pacers, that shows me the sign of a confident team. They are really confident right now that they can pull victories out when they should get beat. You saw them do it in game 5 in the closeout against Milwaukee. And then they
Crazy.
did it in game number 2 the other night against Cleveland. I think Cleveland probably is going to be the bet in game number 3. Maybe look at the money line. I think the money line right now, from what I saw, it was 135 overnight, but I'm seeing more 2.5s now in the market. So you're now seeing money lines out there at around
148.
dollar.
148
Yeah,
at Bet
yeah,
Rivers.
yeah,
Yeah.
148, 145, 150, kind of everybody is in that range. So, and I think that that's probably right here because how do the Pacers now handle success where they're not the underdog, even though they're the underdog in game 3? They're certainly the favorite to win the series. How do they handle that success? So, Cleveland back against the wall. I think you would have to prefer them in game 3, but I think the Pacers are going to win this series. The Cavs aren't able to, they can win, they get the 3-point shot volume. Well, they had the volume, but I think they made the same amount of threes. I think they both made 11 threes because much was made of game 1, 19-9 in terms of the 3-point discrepancy. Cleveland, I think, now needs to win that shot volume being so shorthanded.
One thing that really stood out to me, and I'm definitely curious to hear your thoughts because you're probably locked in on Indiana media and what's been being said, is just the tone and the intensity that the Pacers had, as even when they were trailing, they were pressing full court. They were mucking it up. They were basically saying, we hear it in a lot of sports, whether it be football on the defensive back, like they're going to make the refs call it every play because they were playing with incredible physicality. I believe Kenny Atkinson even complained about it, but they were just setting the tone and playing with an edge that I'm not sure I've ever seen from this Pacers squad. And I wonder if that's going to be the difference ultimately in winning 4 out of 7 games.
Well, I think part of that is a belief and just everybody now playing together because much was made of Tyrese Halliburton. And that's why I think people watched early in the season. And that's why he got so many votes and being the number 1 overrated player in that athletic players poll. But he was injured. He's dealing with the back issues, dealing a little bit with the knee issue. And now all of a sudden he's healthy and he's confident. And I can tell you when he hit that step back 3, that is the sign, whether it's to win the game or even in the first or second quarter. That's a sign he's in his bag when he's able to do that and he has that confidence for that long, deep step back threes at the top of the key. That's when he feels good about his game. And I think just these guys playing together now, this is their second season essentially with this core, with Hallie and with Siakam, and Neesmith and Nemhard are very good defenders that kind of make up for some of Tyrese's defensive inefficiencies, I would say. But even Tyrese, and I hesitate to say this when Donovan Mitchell scored 48, but Tyrese, if you've been watching him, his defense has been a little bit better because that was the criticism last year. Is he willing to guard? And I think he's at least showing a willingness to guard and the other guys see that, they play better defense. So I think you've just got a confident bunch right now, but not to get too overconfident here for game 3 Friday night.
So you like the Cavs in Game 3 as a road favorite to at least win the game on the money line.
I do. I do. I just think that, how you deal with success and I've seen this movie before, and maybe this is my PTSD as a Pacers fan and a former Pacers sports and entertainment employee. I've seen this movie before when everything's kind of going good and then all of a sudden you can't handle success, at least in the short term. So I do think the Cavs take game 3, but I think Indiana goes back to Cleveland. I think Indiana splits at home and the Cavs are going to face elimination in game 5.
Interesting. Okay. I thought Pacers sweep plus 350 was interesting because if they get Game 3, then it's going to be really tough, and I think they can smell blood in the water, and especially if Cleveland's banged up. That's just my 2 cents on that. I'm not ready to pull the trigger on any of those. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out in that regard. Um, I want to go to the game, the series we talked about in the East before, the Knicks and Celtics. It's now minus 110. So the Knicks, if there's 5 games left, they have 3 of them at home, and they're up 2-0, and they're still minus 110. Now, a large reason for that is the fact that they've trailed by 20 in each of these games. So I am not ready to pull the trigger because sometimes you got to know when to walk away. And unfortunately, it happens to every sports bettor, and hopefully some of you who haven't experienced, if you're just you're throwing good money at bad, you just gotta just take your medicine. So I pressed on the Celtics at minus 1.5 games. I thought they for sure would get the win yesterday and sort of right the ship. And that comeback in Game 1 was just fluky. They missed 45 three-pointers, 15 of 60. But no, it's more of the same in game 2. I'm not convinced Tatum's healthy. So, while there's value, I think, in my eyes on the Celtics, given that they led by 20 each of the first 2 games, I'm not ready to, throw more money at Boston because this could just be one of those series where it just goes completely different than you thought it would.
Yeah, I wouldn't dump more money in here either. I mean, the price is so tempting though, right? Minus 110, because what we talked about with the Knicks in terms of their deficiencies is they're not a very deep club. I mean, look at the minutes these guys are playing. Bridges had 42 in game 2, Hart 42, Anunoby 38. Brunson actually a lot less than you would think at 37. Carl Towns at 34. A lot of that, is foul trouble that he's inevitably in every single night. But you just wonder the Knicks with the way Tibbs approaches this, where he doesn't really go that deep into his bench. It's one thing to shorten your rotation, but it's another thing, not to play certain guys. And then is he going to decline the minutes for Mitchell Robinson? Like probably not if Cat's still in foul trouble. But now the Hacker Robinson is becoming a thing, much like I think the Hack of Adams became a thing for Houston there in games number 5 and 6 as he was playing more minutes. So you got to be careful with that. That's always one of those funky things that can kind of mess up a series. So yeah, nothing for me in terms of a series price, but it is pretty staggering to see the Celtics now laying 5.5 on the road. I think there's still some fives out there for game number 3 on Saturday.
Staggering for sure. That's the right word because I don't know what this mindset is with this team. And Porzingis has been shaky. Jalen Brown can't dribble, and all of a sudden Tatum can't dribble that effectively. Um, and the Knicks are good. Like the Knicks are a good team. They don't play much defense. But if Boston can't hit threes, but they've certainly died by the 3 in games 1 and 2. Can they live by the 3 and hold on? I do think if they can get this next game, all of a sudden they have a little bounce in their step. So things would change. I thought that was the case going into game 2 as well. And hey, we got there in the first quarter, first half line, just didn't get there on the game line. But it's a fascinating series, and when you add the fact that Boston and New York are involved, and the fact that they're division rivals, and that this New York City has been just aching for a title since the '70s, and I said this, and I got to remind people: New York's a basketball town. Don't
Mhm.
let the Yankees' success fool you. This is a basketball town with all the blacktop hoops and everything going on in that city. A Knicks championship would be unreal.
And
And to go through the Celtics and to go through all these teams, look, if OKC's got some warts, who knows how this all unfolds. But the Knicks, I'm happy for New York basketball fans. It's obviously been about Boston blowing leads and it's been about New York doing the right things. But hey, New York's got to not go down 20 for them to start getting more respect.
And that's the thing you have to also take into account with the Knicks because you're going to get the media hype now. Because they've been waiting so long, everybody buys in and you get that hype, which would worry me, even though I think from a number standpoint in game 3, they're probably the value at 5.5 because that seems way too high. But that could be, I don't know, maybe a little bit public doggish in game number 3. So I got to do a little bit more investigating before I get involved there.
Yeah, I just wonder if Boston's broken, right? Their spirit, something's wrong with Tatum. That last possession was baffling. Who knows? But it is certainly a fascinating series, and I'm curious how it all unfolds. But I at least have another day to sleep on it. You're not on the show tomorrow. I am, but I wanted to get your opinion here, and I also want to get your opinion on this OKC situation. So now the adjusted series price after they won by a million in game 2, it's minus 560. The comeback plus 400 as the series shifts to Denver, and OKC only a 5-point favorite in game 3. I initially think there's value here on the Thunder. I really do. In that game 3. What's your take on the series price and even game 3?
Well, one of the things you have to, I think, determine is how is this series going to continue to be called? Because Jokic, of course, and I know the game was well decided there in the late in the third quarter when he did so, but Jokic did foul out. And, Jokic has those different moves. He has that little swim move where it kind of looks like he's being hooked and held, but he's actually holding the defender. and it's getting called now. So are they going to keep calling it, or are they going to kind of, listen to what some of the Nuggets said, even though they weren't making excuses and saying, okay, the outcome was in doubt because of the way it was called. But, does that hook and hold? Does that extend the elbow on screen? So are they going to continue to call that? Or are they not? And how do you officiate the best player in the world? And that's going to be a big play, I think, in terms of these series. You don't want to over rely necessarily on one game, even though the Thunder have been the class of the league all year. They've won 68 games for a reason. But you know, Denver somehow, some way, it was ironic because everybody was betting against them in game 7. We saw the same thing, obviously, against with Golden State when that line went from 5.5 to like 7.5 at the close of business. And everybody, started to bet Oklahoma City, and then they laid an egg in game number 1. This team's been the best defensive team in the league for a reason. And it's hard to get in front of them. I certainly have no interest in getting in front of them for the series, but seeing five out there in most of the market, this might be a stay away game, because where it's like, okay, let me watch this game from a side and total perspective, and that's going to determine how the rest of the series goes. There certainly will be some prop, I think, where you can sell some of the Oklahoma City players where their numbers are going to get inflated based on what they produced offensively last night.
We've had Chris Massaro on. He's talked about the concern he has on his Thunder futures, and I get it. But this series has been pretty one-sided, all things considered. Now, Game 2 would have never unfolded the way it unfolded if the Thunder had won Game 1. Let's just be smart about this. Some of this playoff handicapping is an exercise in critical thinking. We know what happened with Denver's mindset, and then how hard OKC played, having lost Game 1. So but with that being said, I think so much has to go right for Denver to hang, and as long as OKC doesn't wet the bed, they're the better team. I do think there's a scenario where the Thunder win in 6, as we see the odds here at Bet Rivers, 4-2 plus 225. I think it's 2-2, and then OKC wins the final 2 games of games 5 and 6, but I'm not convinced. I mean, I do like OKC. I don't like them. I think over 5.5 games is tempting. It's basically saying, will Denver win another game? So I do like minus 210 in that capacity to get one of these 2 games. But if
Yeah.
I like OKC in game 1, why would I bet that? I would just wait to bet them in game 4. Sorry, I would bet Denver in game 4 instead of minus 210 over 5.5. So I early lean would be OKC minus the 5 in game 3. But that's how I'm seeing this series. I'm not quite ready, but Jokic is fantastic. I think I'm going to go back to the well with his over points prop in game 3 as well. That's the early read for me.
Yeah, I think maybe this is where I would look at exact result. What was it in 6? Was it 2.25? I believe I
Yeah,
just saw for the
plus
price at,
225.
at Bet Rivers. That would be the way I would look, because I feel like Denver has enough where maybe they're going to get some calls their way, and they have the best player in the world, where he just has one of those stupid triple double games, and all of a sudden, they at least get one more. Because I could see kind of Oklahoma City closing it out in game number 6 there at the Ball Arena in Denver, where then it's kind of like that changing of the guard, right? Denver was the champion last year, and now here comes this young upstart that maybe wasn't ready for it last year. They weren't ready necessarily to get to the Western Conference Finals. And then you see them finally accomplish that. So Oklahoma City in 6 makes a lot of sense to me.
Good. We're thinking alike. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but that's nice to hear that we're thinking along those lines. All right, man. Any parting shot here of the playoffs other than go Pacers?
Yeah.
Any thoughts here before we let you go?
Yeah, hashtag yes, sirs, even though I like the blue collar gold swagger tagline that they had several years ago. So I wish that they would go back to that. But look, exciting, man. Exciting time for pro basketball in Indiana with Tyrese Halliburton leading the Pacers, perhaps at least to the East Finals. And that's what I would like to see. Pacers and Knicks. 30 years ago, actually, yesterday was the 8 points, 9 seconds anniversary, if you recall. Reggie Miller in the Knicks in the Garden. So, we've got Tyrese, we've got Caitlin Clark about to start up. I know we'll be talking some WNBA in the coming weeks. So exciting time for pro ball in Indianapolis.
We're only 2 wins away in each series from another Knicks Pacers series, and who knows? Maybe Tyrese's dad will get to appear. Maybe they should trot you out there instead of Tyrese's dad, just while he's on double secret probation.
I can sneak him into the game. I know some of the secret entrances there at Gamebridge Fieldhouse, I can put Papa John into the game. We'll see which season ticket holder will sell tickets to Spike, perhaps.
Yeah, that's right. Spike always finds his way on the road, on the court. All right, my man. Good stuff as always, Wes. We appreciate it. We appreciate everyone chiming in. We didn't get to everyone who was joining the conversation, but we will be back at it tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern, every single day during the work week, right here on Betting Weekly Fast Break. We also launched the baseball show that Wes appeared at the beginning of the week, Betting Weekly Hardball. So good stuff across the board. Thanks to all of our guests. We'll have a rotation of really sharp guys, professional handicappers, professional bettors, and whatnot. So we hope to see you tomorrow. For Wes Reynolds, I am Doug Kezirian, and we'll see you back here next time.